So this is a case study about a married couple who are 59 and 56 years old. They have Social Security and $2.5 million that they saved up. And they started working with me to see if they can retire. They are both currently working in IT and healthcare. They recently have family that passed away, and it made them more aware that time is limited and they should focus on what is important. The two biggest problems that they had was, one, do they have enough money saved up? Their lifestyle spending is very modest, $60,000 per year all in. A second problem that I brought up to them was that they had $2.1 million in pre-tax retirement accounts like traditional IRA and 401k accounts. This is great because their money is growing tax deferred, but it also does mean when they reach required minimum distribution age, for them it's 75, their RMDs could be very large. So the second question is, what are the strategies that they could utilize to minimize their lifetime tax bill? So this case study is going to answer those two questions. And I'll spoil the video now by telling you that they are able to accomplish all their goals. And this video is going to talk about the how. So my work began 2 years ago when they reached out to me, and I work with them on a subscription basis to provide ongoing guidance and recommendation. Some of the things we've already done is look at their investment accounts to consolidate and make sure that every investment is aligned to their investment objective and it's properly diversified. I also determined that they could distribute out close to $11,000 per month from their retirement accounts without running a high risk of running out of money. We also implement a backdoor Roth IRA strategy because they are still intending to work for a couple more years, and they already maxed out their 401k and HSA accounts. And for retirement planning, we looked at Social Security optimization and also how to reduce required minimum distributions with a Roth conversion strategy. And now, before we dive into the case study, some disclosures. I am a certified financial planner with over a decade of experience, but I am not your financial planner. So this video is for educational purposes only and not meant to be financial advice. And any mention of investment products is not an endorsement or investment recommendation. For the client, let's take a look at their cash flow first. Their household income is $300,000 per year, and their lifestyle cost is $60,000 per year. So there's a big gap between what they spend and what they earn, and they have a very high capacity to save, and they do take advantage of that. One, they are maximized both of their 401ks. Each of them can contribute $30,500, $61,000 per year. Because we've been working together, they can contribute another $16,000 per year for the both of them into a backdoor Roth IRA. So they're saving at least $77,000 per year. So now let's take a look at their net worth. You'll see they have joint cash of $130,000. The husband has $1.45 million in a traditional 401k. The wife has $714,000. The husband also has some Roth 401k of $168,000. The wife doesn't have any. The husband has $114,000 in a Roth IRA, and the wife has a $8,900 account. And their liquid net worth combines to be $2.58 million. Which is a very good amount of savings. And subtract the mortgage, including some life insurance money, and their total net worth is just over $3 million. So a couple of observations that I have here. Number one is that they only have one account for each of these account types. And it's very clean, it's very nice to look at, and easy to manage. But before we began working together, they had a smattering of accounts with different asset managers and different custodians. The husband, for example, had 3 401k accounts. One was not really properly managed. The other one was a very large account and it had very high fees associated with it. Fortunately, his current employer does have very low fee Vanguard funds, and it's actually actively managed with no additional asset management fee. So I really like the current 401k plan that he has through his employer. So we went through the process to consolidate all of the 401k accounts into his current one. He also had traditional IRA accounts before, but we also did a reverse rollover to move the money into the husband's traditional 401k account, so he won't have to pay any additional taxes when he does make backdoor Roth IRA contributions. And after all that work, the accounts are very simple, they're easy to look at, and it makes me really just happy. And the second observation is, aside from the cash, all of their money is in retirement accounts. This is fantastic because all of their growth is either tax deferred or tax free. One problem here is that when each of them turns 75, they will each have required minimum distributions that they have to make from their traditional 401k account. And it could be a very large distribution. So looking at their retirement income projection, when the husband turns 75, he has to start taking 401k distributions at $140,000 per year. And when the wife turns 75, her RMD kicks in, and their combined RMD could be around $276,000. So their cost of living does grow from $60,000, but but they're not going to be spending all of this money. So they'll be forced to take distributions out, pay taxes on it, just so they could put it back into a taxable account to have it invested. And because of their low spending rate, their children are likely to inherit a large traditional 401k account. For example, if there's $3 million and the children are still working and they're in a pretty successful career and they're in a 33% tax bracket, then a third of the $3 million that they receive will be forced to be paid out in taxes, because when you inherit an IRA or a 401k, you are forced to distribute it out within 10 years. So it could be a very significant tax bill. Let's look at the investment mix that they have. For the Roth IRA account, it is 100% in US stock and international stocks. For the husband's 401k, he has a 75% global stock and 25% bond allocation. The wife, slightly more conservative, with 70% stocks and 30% in bonds. Because the 401k account, the investments are clumped together for the traditional 401k and the Roth 401k, there isn't an opportunity for us to separate out the bonds and the stocks to invest separately. But for the Roth IRA, we have full control over. Because it does grow tax-free, it makes the most sense for it to be heavier in stock to take advantage of the tax-free growth. Overall, their mix adds up to be 75% in global stocks and 25% in bonds, which is aligned with their investment risk tolerance and also their stomach for risk. This recommendation does go against conventional wisdom of having their age in bonds, which would be 60% in bonds, but they have such a low spending rate from their account that they can't actually afford to take on more risk because of their past investor behavior where they're kind of absent-minded and they don't really look at their accounts much. I think that's a really good investor trait. So they're not neurotic. They don't tend to trade in and out of the stock market based on their past behaviors, weathering the previous financial storms. I do think that they can afford the risk and also they can stomach the risk. So the final piece of their retirement plan is their Social Security. This is the husband's benefit statement. If he starts right away after he retires, he'll get $2,400. If he works until 70, then he'll get $4,500. The wife also worked, so she's entitled to her own Social Security benefit as well. She starts at 62, it's $1,800. At full retirement age is $2,800. At 70 is $3,500. So when we look at the combined Social Security, you'll see that the wife does make a pretty good Social Security income. It's much more than half of her husband's Social Security benefit at full retirement age. So it doesn't make sense for the wife to claim spousal benefit because it will be less. And starting at age 70 is best for the both of them. But keep in mind, I said these numbers are assuming that they work to a particular age. In the same Social Security statement, you'll see this statement here. These personalized estimates are based on your earnings to date and assume you continue to earn a particular amount of money until you start your benefits. So if you are someone who is intending to retire in early 60s and delay Social Security, then when you're looking at your benefit statement, you need to do the calculation and figure out how much benefit am I actually going to get, because it's going to be less than the amount stated. The planning tool that I utilize does account for the fact that they are working less and their Social Security benefit will be less. And here's how it looks like for them if they start at 70 years old. For the husband, he starts towards the earlier part of the year. He earns $70,000 a year starting out. For the wife, she also starts her Social Security towards the end of the year, but it's around $60,000. Once their combined Social Security is in full force, they're looking at $138,000 per year. And at this income level, they are able to completely survive and actually live pretty well on Social Security alone. So for our planning purposes, we just need to figure out how to make their money last and also generate income until year 2039. Let's look at some comparisons if they started at 62 versus at 70 each. If they start at 62, this is the gray bar, they do start getting income. There's 8 years of income that they get before Social Security starts for the other strategy. But delaying does significantly increase the annual income that you get, not only for when both of them are living, but also in the case that one of them is widowed. In this case, the life expectancy for the husband is 90, and we use 95 for the wife for planning purposes. So in this planning scenario, there's 8 years where the wife is widowed. And with the husband delaying Social Security to 70, getting the maximum benefit, the wife will benefit from that. Because when one spouse dies, the surviving spouse gets to keep the higher of the two benefits. In this scenario, it results in close to $1.2 million more in lifetime benefit. If you can afford it, and if you're expecting to live past a certain point, then it makes a lot of sense to delay. So the break-even point, if they were to start at 62 versus at age 70, is 80 years old. And at 80 years old, delaying to age 70 begins to pay off really well. But for people who are making $300,000 to zero income, is very scary of a thought. So our challenge is to fill in the income gap before they turn 70 years old. And let's look at their withdrawal rate chart. You'll see it starts out around 3%, which is a very low withdrawal rate, and it slowly drops down until age 69. Then you see a big drop. And what happens at age 70 is that the husband turns 70 and he starts his own Social Security. And the withdrawal rate continues to drop after that because we are expecting the market to continue to grow. Then at age 74 for the husband, their withdrawal rate completely drops to zero because the wife turns 70 at that point and she is starting to claim Social Security, and they are living completely off of Social Security at this point. At 75, they have required minimum distribution. The husband turns 75 this year and the wife turns 75 this year, causing them to withdraw out money that they don't need and pay taxes on it. So to fill in the income gap and to generate income, I am planning on using a bucketing strategy where the first bucket is their daily petty cash. The second bucket is for the income needs that they have for a certain amount of year. And the final bucket is their growth bucket, money that they can afford to set aside for the long term and to take risk for growth. So the second bucket in the middle, I intend to use a bond ladder. iShares have bond ETFs that have a target maturity. And out of the 5 choices that they have, Treasury, TIPS, municipal, corporate, and high yield bond, which is another term for junk bond, my favorite choice is the TIPS. TIPS stands for Treasury Inflation Protected Security. It is just as secure as the Treasury. It's issued by the government, but the interest rate goes up if inflation has a sudden spike, like we saw for 3 years during COVID. iShares has a really neat tool to help you visualize the bond ladder. So let's take a look here. If we plan out $80,000 per year in pre-tax distribution to have enough after tax to live off of, then even if we build out a very long ladder of 10 years, that's only $800,000 out of their $2.5 million that they have to set aside. There's a lot of numbers here. The one you need to look at is the yield to maturity, which is the best indicator of what your return is going to be if you hold these bond ETFs to maturity. And it hovers around 4.3 to 4.4%. You also see in the name, they have the specific maturity date. IBIB will mature in October 2025. IBIC will mature in October 2026, and so on and so forth until 2034. This is the ideal design for a bond ladder for their middle bucket because they know for the next 10 years of their retirement, their income needs are completely secured. It is free from stock market risk. It is free from credit risk. They know they're going to get their money back from the government. It's also free from inflation risk because it is a Treasury inflation protected security. So the first benefit is that it makes the decision of how much bonds to own relatively straightforward. If you set aside $800,000 in a 10-year bond ladder, then for this client, it's 30% of their money invested in bonds, which I think is within their risk tolerance. It's also really easy to understand and to grasp. It's critically important when you're making investment decisions to invest in things you understand. The industry tends to use a total return approach of income generation, meaning all of the money is invested in one portfolio strategy. A similar one would be having all of their money invested in one portfolio that has 70% in global stocks and 30% in bonds. But the problem with that is when you're actually retired and you see your portfolio drop, say 30%, it's still really hard to stomach selling the necessary shares when your portfolio is down 30%. So the second benefit of a bond ladder is that they can ignore the short-term noise in the stock market, even if their portfolio is down 40-50%, because they know that they have 10 years worth of living expenses already saved up. And it leads to better investor behavior, and that ultimately leads to a better retirement outcome. And you have the luxury too of timing when to fill up the bucket. If we retire and the market drops right away, you are somewhat immune from sequence of return risk because you are able to live off of the bond ladder. Even if it takes 4 years for the stock market to recover and you feel comfortable selling your stocks again, then you still have 6 years worth of expenses saved up. So to summarize and answer the question of do they have enough money saved up, they easily do. We can set aside $800,000 out of their $2.5 million nest egg to secure the cost of living for their first 10 years of retirement. Then after the first 10 years, 60% of their cost of living can be covered by Social Security income from the husband. And in 13 years, when the wife's Social Security kicks in at age 70 for her, 100% of their cost of living is covered by Social Security. After setting aside $800,000, they still have $1.5 $1.7 million invested for the future. $1.7 million that they don't really need to touch anymore. They have a lot of money saved up. They should feel very comfortable with retiring even today. So this assumes that their lifestyle stays the same, that they maintain $60,000 per year in spending. But let's look at it from another angle. Let's look at how much they can afford to spend without a high risk of running out of money. I projected with $2.5 million saved up, they could spend up to $9,700 after taxes in retirement starting today. Because their portfolio is subject to stock market risk, we do have to be flexible with making adjustments. Here's a better illustration of this. So this is their current level of distribution. It's $11,300 before tax. If their portfolio grows by about 5%, then they can give themselves a pay raise. If it drops a significant degree, at that point, they need to make a downward adjustment. So the reason why there is such a big cushion is because they are spending a small percentage of their investment assets. If they are spending a big percentage, say 5, 6, 7%, then they don't have much room to take on risk in the short term, and they need to make a downward adjustments quicker. The biggest worry that people have is they retire and the stock market falls right away. This is the sequence of return risk, but based on their conservative spending rate, they can still afford to give themselves pay raises, even if they retired right before the global financial crisis happened. The only time we see a drop here is in 2008 when the stock market fell 40% that year. If they instead retired before the dot-com bubble burst, they still look pretty good. There's a long period of time here that they don't get to give themselves a pay raise, and that is because of the 08-09 financial crisis. And the final example is here all the way back to 1929. They retire at the peak of the market, and then the market starts to fall and fall and fall and fall. The S&P 90, which is the equivalent of the S&P 500 today, dropped 80% from top to bottom. But the fact that they are still able to go from about $13,000 in spending down to about $9,000 in spending, it is a big drop down each year. But you're still able to have some sort of income instead of having to rely on the soup kitchen. With all things considered, this is still a pretty good outcome. Now let's talk about the second problem of how to deal with the large RMD tax bill. If they don't do any tax planning ahead of time, then when they retire until age 75 for the husband, they're going to have very low levels of income. This is a very visible valley here. And when the husband turns 75, his RMD kicks in close to $250,000. And then a few years later, the wife's RMD kicks in to be over $300,000 in income a year. From that point on, you see their RMD continues to grow and grow and grow. And it grows at a faster rate than what you would expect because of two factors. Number one, your required minimum distribution as a percentage of your investment balance in an IRA account grows as you get older. And also, the client is not spending any money out of their 401k account once their Social Security fully kicks in. So their investments are growing inside the account as well. So those two factors really influence and have their RMDs grow a lot. And you can see it actually grows beyond the 24% tax bracket, which in the future is going to be 28%. So let's look at some strategies for how this client can reduce their RMD tax bill. So number one, before Social Security kicks in, 100% of their spending should come from pre-tax IRA and 401k accounts. Over 10 years, this could reduce the IRA balance by quite a bit. And number two, delay Social Security as late as possible until age 70. So there's more years that they could spend from the pre-tax accounts. And finally, after pulling money from your IRA account, if you're still in a pretty low tax bracket, then it makes sense to distribute out even more and put it back into a Roth IRA account called the Roth conversion and do that up to the 22-25% tax bracket for this client. So here's how it will look like if they convert it at the 22% tax bracket. The blue is the before if they don't do any tax planning, and the green is their taxable income if they convert it up to the 22%, 25% tax bracket. You can see that they are converting successfully before RMD age, and at that point they have $0 in a traditional 401k or IRA account. This does keep their lifetime tax bill below 22%. It never grows beyond that to the 24% or 28% tax bracket. And this would effectively lower their tax bill by a significant margin. But when I see this, having the second half of their retirement be at a 0% tax rate, I think that's a missed opportunity too. Because the ideal scenario would be to stretch out and to take all of this surface area and squish it to be as flat as possible throughout retirement. Before we look at converting to a lower tax bracket, let's look at the result of converting at the 22% tax bracket. This is the before, this is what their children are likely to inherit. It's going to be half of their money in a taxable account because they are doing RMDs at age 75. They're not spending it, so they're reinvesting it in a taxable account. Then they're never spending their Roth IRA money, so it continues to grow. And then their tax deferred money stays a pretty small portion at that point. But if we did proper tax planning, then 100% of their children's inheritance could be in a Roth IRA account, and it could be very advantageous. So now let's look at converting at a lower tax bracket. The problem with converting at the 12% tax rate is that they don't move the needle nearly as much. And they still have RMD, they still are paying taxes potentially over 22%. And how it will look like when the children inherit it is there's still some IRA balance, but it's very small. A smaller chunk of their money is in a taxable account, and then 67% is tax-free. So the conclusion here is that converting at 22% converts too much. Converting at 12% does not convert fast enough. So the strategy is not set in stone. So the idea is each year we need to evaluate how much conversion needs to be done, be mindful of over conversion. With this planning work, it tells me that converting somewhere in the middle of 12% to 22% is probably an ideal starting point for them. So after all this work, the husband decides he's still going to continue to work. His work is not too stressful. He really enjoys his coworkers. The work is interesting. He's currently on a consulting gig for potentially 1 or 2 more years. And once that wraps up, he'll seriously consider retiring. The wife works as a registered nurse. She has a lot of control and flexibility over the number of hours she works. So next year, she's planning on reducing the number of hours to be more part-time. And ultimately, they're working because they want to, not because they need to. That's it for the case study today. I hope you learned something useful. Thanks for watching.